Everyone knows Achilles, the greatest warrior who ever lived, unstoppable, invincible, the man who turned the tide of the Trojan War. Here is what nobody mentions. He spent most of that war sitting in a tent, not wounded, not sick, sulking, over a girl he did not even love, while his allies died by the thousands outside. The greatest warrior in history almost lost the war for his own side, not in battle, through sheer inability to handle a bruised ego. How does someone like that become a legend? That is exactly what we are going to find out. Achilles was never supposed to be mortal. His mother Thetis was a sea nymph, powerful, beautiful, and completely terrified of losing her son. She had good reason to be. The prophecy was clear. Achilles would die young. Not maybe, not possibly, definitely. The only question was when and how much glory he would accumulate before it happened. Thetis decided she was not interested in accepting this. She took the infant Achilles to the river Styx, the boundary between the living world and the underworld. Water so sacred and so dangerous that even gods treated it with respect. According to legend, if you bathed in it, you became invulnerable to any weapon. She held her son by the heel and dipped him in. Every part of his body touched the water, except the heel she was holding. That one small spot, the place where her fingers gripped his ankle, stayed dry. She had turned her son into the most physically powerful human being who would ever live, and left him with one weakness so obvious that it became the most famous vulnerability in the history of warfare: the heel of Achilles. Known to this day as the term for a fatal flaw in something otherwise invincible, because his mother held on too tight. But physical invulnerability was only half the problem. There was still the prophecy. Thetis went to the oracle and received news that no mother wants to hear delivered this clearly. Two paths, two lives, no middle ground. Path 1. Achilles stays home, lives quietly, grows old, dies surrounded by grandchildren who will forget his name within a generation. Path 2. Achilles goes to Troy, fights the greatest war of the ancient world, dies young, is remembered forever. Most people presented with this choice would need time to think. Achilles did not need time. He had not even reached adulthood yet, and he had already decided. Glory. Always glory, whatever the cost. This decision, made before he fully understood what death meant, would define everything that followed, every battle he fought, every enemy he killed, every ally he failed, every moment of the war where his pride mattered more to him than the lives around him. He chose his fate before he was old enough to understand it, and then spent the rest of his life being exactly the person that choice required him to be. Thetis understood one thing clearly. If her son was going to die young, he was at least going to be extraordinary before it happened. She handed him to Chiron, not a human tutor, not a palace educator, a centaur, half man, half horse, the oldest and wisest creature in Greece, the being who had already taught Hercules and Jason and half the legendary heroes of the ancient world. Chiron lived on Mount Pelion, away from cities, away from politics, away from the comfortable softness that turned promising young men into mediocre adults. He had very specific ideas about education. Music first, not as decoration, as discipline. The ability to control breath and rhythm and emotion before you could control anything else. Achilles learned to play the lyre with the same focus that other boys learned to fight. Then medicine, how bodies worked, how wounds healed, what killed quickly and what killed slowly. Chiron believed a warrior who understood anatomy was worth 10 who did not. Then hunting, not for sport, for patience. For the ability to wait without moving for hours in cold, wet conditions and strike at exactly the right moment. Then combat, last, after everything else. Because Chiron understood something that most military trainers did not. Strength without intelligence is just destruction. The result of this education was something genuinely unusual. A boy who could compose music and treat wounds and track animals through impossible terrain and then destroy any opponent he faced in single combat. A complete human being with one catastrophic flaw that no amount of education could fix. Achilles had an ego the size of the Aegean Sea. Not arrogance exactly, not the lazy confidence of someone who has never been tested. Something more dangerous than that. A genuine, absolute, unshakable belief that his honor was the most important thing in any situation. That any slight against his dignity was a wound that demanded satisfaction. That the world owed him recognition proportional to his abilities. And his abilities were extraordinary, which made the ego worse. Chiron saw it, tried to address it, taught him philosophy alongside combat, showed him that the greatest warriors were those who chose their battles carefully, who understood that winning the wrong fight at the wrong moment could cost you everything. Achilles listened, nodded, and remained exactly who he was. Some things cannot be taught out of a person. By the time he left Chiron's cave, Achilles was the most completely trained warrior in Greece. Musician, healer, hunter, fighter, philosopher, and completely incapable of letting an insult go without response. The perfect weapon, pointed at anyone who got too close, including his own side. Thetis knew the prophecy better than anyone. Troy meant death. Not eventually, not possibly, definitely. The moment Achilles set foot on Trojan soil, his fate was sealed. He would fight. He would win. He would die. She was not ready to accept that. So she did what any desperate divine mother would do when faced with an inevitable prophecy. She dressed her son as a girl and hid him on an island, the island of Skyros, ruled by a king named Lycomedes. Thetis arrived with a young woman she introduced as her daughter, Pyrrha, red-haired, quiet, modest, unremarkable in every way. Lycomedes accepted this without too many questions. Pyrrha joined the royal household, lived among the king's daughters, learned their customs, participated in their activities. For a period of time, this actually worked, which tells you something remarkable about Achilles. The most physically powerful human being alive, a young man trained since childhood in combat, hunting, and athletics, successfully passed as a girl long enough to matter. He was apparently committed to the disguise. He also apparently found time during this period to fall genuinely in love with one of the king's daughters, a girl named Didamia. They had a son together named Neoptolemus. So the disguise was not entirely convincing to everyone in the household, but to the outside world, Pyrrha remained a mystery. Meanwhile, the Greeks had a problem. The war against Troy was not going well. More accurately, the war against Troy had not started because the Greeks could not get their best warrior to show up. A prophet had told Agamemnon, the king leading the Greek coalition, that Troy could not be taken without Achilles. Not would not be, could not be. They needed him. They sent Odysseus. Odysseus was the cleverest man in Greece, possibly the cleverest man in the ancient world. He had heard the rumors about a mysterious girl on Skyros, and he had a theory. He arrived at the palace of Lycomedes disguised as a merchant, spread out his goods for the royal household to examine. Beautiful fabrics, jewelry, cosmetics, everything a young woman of the palace might desire. And in the middle of all of it, a sword, a spear, a shield. The daughters of Lycomedes gathered around the fabrics and the jewelry. One of them picked up the sword, examined it with the practiced eye of someone who had spent years learning how to use one. Odysseus had seen enough. He revealed himself, explained the situation, Troy, the prophecy, the war that could not be won without Achilles. Here is the remarkable part. Achilles did not argue, did not protest, did not need convincing, did not weigh the options or ask for time to consider. He had already decided years ago. The prophecy, the choice, short life, eternal glory. He had been waiting for someone to come and get him. The disguise was his mother's idea, not his. He had gone along with it out of love for her. But the moment Odysseus appeared with a real sword and a real war to fight, Achilles was already moving toward the ships. He said goodbye to Didymia, acknowledged their son, made arrangements for the boy's future, then left, without looking back. Thetis had tried everything a mother could try. Divine water, remote islands, disguise, deception, an entire alternative life constructed specifically to keep him away from his fate. It lasted until the first person showed up with a weapon. Achilles sailed for Troy, exactly as the prophecy had always said he would. Achilles arrived at Troy and immediately became the most valuable asset the Greeks had, not because of strategy, not because of leadership, not because of any quality that made him useful in a complex military operation, because he was simply better at killing people than anyone else on either side of the war. He led raids on surrounding cities, captured supplies, destroyed Trojan allies before they could reinforce the main army. In the first years of the war, Achilles personally sacked 12 cities by sea and 11 by land. 23 cities, one man. The Greeks were winning, not decisively, not quickly. But the momentum was theirs, and at the center of that momentum was Achilles, moving through enemy forces like something the ancient world had no category for. Then Agamemnon made a mistake. Not a small mistake, not a diplomatic miscalculation. The specific kind of mistake that could only be made by someone who fundamentally did not understand what he was dealing with. During a raid on the city of Chrysae, the Greeks took prisoners. Among them was Chryseis, daughter of a priest of Apollo. Agamemnon claimed her as his personal prize. The priest came to the Greek camp, offered an enormous ransom, asked respectfully for his daughter back. Agamemnon refused, sent the old man away with threats. Apollo, who took the disrespect of his priest rather personally, responded by sending a plague into the Greek camp. Not a mild illness, a devastating epidemic that killed soldiers and animals for 9 days straight. The Greeks assembled to figure out what was happening. A prophet explained, "Return the girl, apologize to the priest. The plague stops." Agamemnon agreed, grudgingly, furiously, in the way that powerful men agree to things they consider beneath them. But he had a condition. If he was giving up his prize, then someone else was giving up theirs. He looked at Achilles and announced that he would be taking Briseis, a woman Achilles had won in battle, as compensation. The tent went quiet. Achilles looked at Agamemnon. Now, to be clear about what Briseis actually represented to Achilles, ancient sources suggest he had genuine affection for her, but this was not primarily about love. This was about honor. In the warrior culture of ancient Greece, your prizes were your public proof of worth. They represented what you had earned through risk and skill and courage. Taking them back was not just an insult. It was a statement that your contribution meant nothing, that your commander could erase your achievements whenever it suited him. Achilles had just been told that the greatest military commander in Greece considered his honor disposable. What followed was one of the most consequential arguments in ancient history. Achilles reached for his sword, seriously considered killing Agamemnon on the spot. The goddess Athena appeared, visible only to Achilles, and told him to put the sword away, that revenge would come, that patience would serve him better than violence right now. Achilles put the sword away, then did something in some ways more damaging than killing Agamemnon would have been. He went to his tent and stayed there. He sent a message to his mother Thetis, asked her to go to Zeus and arrange for the Greeks to start losing, so badly, so consistently, that Agamemnon would be forced to come begging for Achilles to return. Thetis went to Zeus. Zeus agreed. The Greeks began losing. Not slowly, not gradually, catastrophically. The Trojans, under their greatest warrior Hector, pushed the Greeks back to their ships, back to the beach, to the edge of the ocean, with nowhere left to retreat. Greeks died by the thousands. Agamemnon tried everything. He sent ambassadors to Achilles with extraordinary offers: return Briseis, a formal apology, 7 cities as gifts, his own daughter in marriage, treasure beyond counting. Achilles refused everything. The offers were genuine. The compensation was more than generous. By any reasonable standard, Achilles had been more than compensated for the original insult. But this was no longer about Briseis. This was about the principle that Agamemnon had dared to disrespect him at all. That was not something treasure could fix. Achilles sat in his tent, played his lyre. While outside, his allies were dying for a war he had decided was beneath his participation. This went on, and on, and on. The greatest warrior in the history of Greece, sitting 20 meters from the battlefield, listening to the screams of dying men, who were dying partly because he was not there to prevent it, choosing his pride over their lives every single day. There was one person who could reach Achilles when nobody else could: Patroclus, his closest friend, his companion since childhood, the one person in the Greek camp whose opinion Achilles genuinely valued, whose presence in the tent during the long days of self-imposed exile was the only thing that made the situation bearable. Ancient sources are not entirely clear about the exact nature of their relationship. What is clear is this: Patroclus was the only human being alive who could say things to Achilles that would have gotten anyone else killed. And he used that privilege. He watched the Greeks losing, watched men he knew dying on the beach, watched the Trojan army push closer and closer to the ships. And then he went into the tent and told Achilles exactly what he thought. He was not gentle about it. He called Achilles merciless, said that whatever was wrong with him had nothing to do with his parents, because no sea nymph and no mortal man could have produced something this cold. He described in detail what was happening outside, not abstract casualty numbers, specific men, specific wounds, specific deaths that Achilles could have prevented. Achilles listened and did not move. His pride was too large, the wound too fresh, the principle too important to abandon even for this. But Patroclus had a plan. He did not ask Achilles to fight. He asked to borrow his armor. The logic was simple. The armor of Achilles was legendary. Every Trojan on that battlefield knew what it looked like. If someone appeared wearing it, moving with confidence, leading a charge, the Trojans would believe Achilles had returned to the fight. The psychological impact alone might be enough to turn the tide. Achilles agreed, with conditions. Patroclus could drive the Trojans back from the ships, could relieve the immediate pressure on the Greek camp. But he was not to pursue them toward Troy, not to get drawn into extended combat. Strike hard and pull back. Come home. Patroclus agreed. He put on the armor of Achilles, took his weapons, led the Myrmidons, Achilles' personal forces who had been sitting idle with their commander, out of the camp and into battle. The effect was immediate and exactly as predicted. The Trojans saw the armor, believed Achilles had returned. The panic that spread through their lines was visible. Warriors who had been advancing moments before suddenly needed to reassess every assumption they had made about the day. Patroclus fought brilliantly. He drove the Trojans back, relieved the ships, changed the momentum of the battle completely. And then forgot the conditions. Swept up in the chaos of genuine combat, intoxicated by the success, convinced in the moment that he could do more, he pushed forward, toward Troy. Deeper into Trojan territory than he was supposed to go. Apollo saw him coming. The god struck Patroclus from behind, knocked the helmet from his head, snapped his spear, left him stunned and exposed in the middle of the battlefield. A Trojan warrior wounded him, and then Hector arrived. Hector, the greatest Trojan warrior, the man defending his city and his family with everything he had. He saw a figure in the famous armor of Achilles, stumbling and vulnerable. He drove his spear through him. Patroclus fell. With his last breath, he told Hector something important. "You did not kill me. Death was already on me before you arrived. And the man whose armor I wear will make you pay for this." Hector took the armor of Achilles from the body of Patroclus. A messenger ran to the Greek camp, ran to the tent where Achilles was sitting, and told him what had happened. Achilles made a sound that ancient sources describe as something between a scream and a howl. Something that did not sound like it came from a human being. His mother heard it from the bottom of the sea and rose immediately to the surface. He fell to the ground, covered himself in ash and dirt, wept. Not with the restrained grief of a warrior culture that considered public emotion weakness, with the complete abandon of someone whose center had been removed. The war, the insult, Agamemnon, the pride that had seemed so absolutely important for so many months. None of it mattered. Patroclus was dead, and Achilles had sent him out there. He had given him the armor, had agreed to the plan, had sat in his tent playing his lyre while his closest friend went to fight a war that Achilles himself had refused to fight. The guilt of that was something no amount of revenge could ever fully address. But he was going to try. Achilles did not sleep that night. He sat outside his tent in the darkness and made a decision that had actually been made the moment he heard the news. He was going back to war. Not for Greece, not for Agamemnon, not for the alliance or the mission or any principle larger than himself. For Patroclus and for Hector. Thetis came to him from the sea. She already knew. She had felt it from the bottom of the ocean the moment it happened. She sat with her son in the darkness and listened to him say things that no mother wants to hear her child say. He told her he was going to kill Hector. She told him what would follow, ancient and unavoidable. The prophecy had always been specific. After Hector dies, your death comes next. Achilles looked at her. Then let Hector die first, and I will die after. Thetis wept, then went to have new armor made. Hephaestus, god of the forge, worked through the night. The result was something that had never existed before and would never exist again. Divine craftsmanship applied to human warfare. A shield depicting the entire world, armor that gleamed like fire in sunlight. Achilles put it on at dawn, then walked to Agamemnon's tent, the man he had refused to speak to for months, the man whose insult had started all of this, whose decision to take Briseis had cost thousands of Greek lives and ultimately the life of Patroclus. Achilles stood in front of him and said something that took everyone present by surprise. I forgive you. Not warmly, not with any particular generosity, with the flat, exhausted certainty of someone who has realized that the thing he was furious about no longer matters, that he wasted months on a wound that now seemed completely irrelevant compared to the wound he was carrying now. Agamemnon offered the compensation he had offered before: treasure, cities. Briseis returned with an oath that she had never been touched. Achilles was not listening. He was already thinking about Hector. He went to the battlefield. What followed is described in ancient sources with a kind of awe that suggests even people accustomed to war had not seen anything like it. Achilles moved through the Trojan army like something that had stopped being human. Not tactical, not strategic, just forward. Always forward. Killing everything between himself and the man he was looking for. The river god Scamander tried to stop him, literally. The river rose up against him because so many bodies were clogging its waters that it could not flow. Achilles fought a river. He won. Hector was outside the walls of Troy when Achilles reached him. The entire city was watching from the walls above. Priam, Hecuba, Andromache, Hector's wife holding their infant son, everyone who loved him. Hector had waited. He had intended to face Achilles directly, had told himself that running was not something a warrior of his standing could do, had stood at the gates while Achilles approached across the plain. And then Achilles got close enough for Hector to see his face. Hector ran. 3 times around the walls of Troy, Achilles behind him, the city watching, the gods watching. The entire Greek camp watching from the beach. Eventually, Hector stopped. Not because he was no longer afraid, because running was worse than dying. He turned and faced Achilles. He made one request before they fought. Whichever of us dies, let the other return the body to his family. Let him be buried with honor. Achilles said no. There are no agreements between men and lions. They fought. It was not long. Achilles drove his spear through the gap between Hector's neck and shoulder, the one place in the divine armor of Achilles that Hector was now wearing that was not fully protected. Hector fell. With his last breath, he told Achilles what Thetis had already told him, that Paris and Apollo were coming for him, that revenge was already on its way. Achilles said he knew, that he would die whenever fate decided, but not today. Then he tied Hector's body to his chariot and drove around the walls of Troy, once, twice, 3 times. The city watching from above. Priam on the walls watching his son's body dragged through the dirt. Andromache, who had not yet been told, hearing the noise and coming to look and understanding in one moment everything that had happened and everything that was coming. Achilles drove around those walls 12 times over the following days. Every morning, the same circuit, the same body, the same message delivered to everyone watching. This is what happens. This is what I am. The gods were disturbed by this, not by the killing, by what came after. There are rules, even in war, even between enemies. The dead deserve burial. Apollo went to Zeus. Zeus intervened. He sent Thetis to her son with a message. Allow the body to be ransomed. Let Priam come. Achilles agreed. That night an old man came alone to the Greek camp, through enemy lines, through the darkness, to the tent of the man who had killed his son and desecrated his body for 12 days. Priam, king of Troy. Old man. Father. He went to Achilles and did something that nobody in that camp had ever seen a king do. He knelt. He took Achilles' hands in his own, the hands that had killed Hector, and he asked for his son's body. He said something that reached through everything, through the armor and the grief and the rage and the divine destiny and the pride that had caused so much destruction. He said, "Think of your own father. He is old, like me. He will never see you again. At least I had my son until today. Pity me. Remember your father. Return my son to me." Achilles wept. They wept together, the old king and the young warrior. Each mourning something different, each understanding something about the other that required no translation. Achilles returned the body. He promised a truce for 11 days so Troy could hold funeral games for Hector. And for 11 days, the war stopped. 2 enemies, 1 grief. One moment of recognition that beneath everything, the war, the prophecy, the pride, the rage, they were both just men who had lost someone they loved. It was the most human moment in the entire Iliad. And it happened because an old man had the courage to kneel before the person who had destroyed his family. And because Achilles, underneath everything, still had the capacity to respond to that. The 11 days ended. The war resumed. And the prophecy that had followed Achilles since before he could walk came to collect what it was owed. Paris was not a warrior. Everyone knew this. The Trojans knew it. The Greeks knew it. Paris himself probably knew it. He was the man who had started the war by stealing another king's wife, who had fought Menelaus in single combat, the one man who had the most personal reason to destroy him, and lost so completely that Aphrodite had to physically remove him from the battlefield before Menelaus could finish it. Paris was beautiful, charming, skilled with a bow, and completely useless in the kind of direct combat that decided things in the ancient world. But Apollo was watching. Apollo, who had sent the plague, who had knocked Patroclus from his feet, who had been working against the Greeks throughout the war, for reasons that ancient sources attribute to various insults and allegiances, but which ultimately came down to the fact that divine beings pick sides and then commit fully. Apollo guided the arrow. Paris drew his bow somewhere on the walls of Troy or in the chaos of battle, accounts differ, and released. The arrow crossed the distance between them and found the one place on Achilles that the river Styx had never touched. The heel. That small piece of ankle that Thetis had held while dipping her son in divine water. The grip of a mother who loved her child so completely that she could not let go even for the moment it would have taken to make him fully invulnerable. The arrow went through it. Achilles fell. The greatest warrior who ever lived. Killed not in single combat with an equal, not by a hero of comparable ability, by an arrow fired by a man who could not face him directly, guided by a god who would not fight him openly. Even his death was an insult. His companions fought to recover his body, while the Trojans tried to take it. Ajax, the second strongest Greek warrior, carried him off the battlefield, while Odysseus held the Trojans back. They brought him to the ships. Thetis came from the sea with her sisters. Their mourning was audible across the entire Greek camp. Soldiers who had fought beside Achilles for years and had reasons to resent him, his pride, his stubbornness, the months he had spent in his tent while they died, stood silent on the beach and listened to a goddess weep for her son. He was burned on a great pyre, his ashes mixed with those of Patroclus as he had requested, together in death as they had been in life. The Trojan War continued without him. Troy fell eventually, through the wooden horse, through Odysseus's plan, through the grinding machinery of a war that had lasted a decade. But the fall of Troy is not remembered the way the rage of Achilles is remembered. The horse is a clever trick. The siege is a logistics problem. The politics are complicated. Achilles is something else entirely. He is the thing that happens when extraordinary ability meets unmanageable pride. When the greatest gift imaginable comes packaged with a flaw that undermines everything it touches. When a person is simultaneously the best version of what a human being can be and a catastrophic version of what a human being can be. At the same time, without contradiction, he chose glory over life before he understood what either meant. He let thousands of men die rather than accept an insult to his honor. He sent his closest friend to his death by refusing to fight a war that was his to fight. And then he returned to that war and became the thing the prophecy had always said he would be: unstoppable, terrifying, gone too soon. He got exactly what he chose: the short life, the eternal name, the story that 3,000 years later still has not been forgotten. Whether that was worth it is a question nobody can answer for someone else. Achilles answered it for himself before he was old enough to know what he was choosing, and then spent his entire life, all 20-something years of it, living with that answer.